Okay, folks, this one is going to blow your mind. Okay, because this guy I met at the end of 2016, I'm taking you way back. This was right after I'd launched my first book. I meet this dude. We're at a speaking conference. And since then, this guy has just taken off like an absolute rocket ship. But most importantly, beyond his career just constantly evolving, this dude's a great human being. And that's what I'm really excited to talk to this guy today and bring him on to the stage. So, Mr. Alan Stein Jr., welcome.
Oh, Jake, man, it's so good to see you again, buddy. It's hard to believe it's been that many years since we met, and it's been so much fun following you and all of your success on social. And anytime we get a chance to interact, I'm very thankful for it. So this will be a fun conversation.
Oh, absolutely. And it really is interesting because, at the time of this recording, that's about 6 and some change years since we've met, since we've known each other. And both of us have evolved a crazy amount over that time. I would love to start here, which is you worked with NBA athletes, you've worked with some of the highest performers in the corporate space as a speaker, and you've noticed that greatness doesn't come overnight. Greatness takes time to evolve. And so what I would love to know to get this party started is how have you seen your journey evolve? And where do you find yourself in the space of today in terms of your career and your outlook on life?
Great place to start. I would say the single best advice I was ever given as a kid, and I'm thankful I got this advice so early, was the key to high performance, the key to fulfillment, the key to really maximizing your potential is to find what it is that you love, find what it is that you're pretty good at, and then find where those two things intersect. And wherever that point of intersection is, that's going to be your strength zone. And the more time and effort and heart and soul and love you can pour into your strength zone, again, the more fulfilling you'll feel, the more purpose-driven you'll be, but the higher you'll perform. And I've really stayed true to that my entire life. Now, that point of intersection has moved a few times over my life. The first portion of my life, that intersection was as a basketball player. That is how I identified. That was everything to me. When I graduated from college and realized that I didn't have what it took to play the game professionally, I had to move that point of intersection and I became a basketball performance coach. But I was still combining something I loved with something I was naturally pretty decent at. And then the most current iteration, which was right around the time of you and I meeting, was when I decided to shift to be a corporate keynote speaker. And I bring that up because that is something I will always stay true to. And that is a major focal point of my own evolution, is continuing to follow that North Star of that strength zone. And while I absolutely love what I'm doing at present, I love keynote speaking, I have the humility to know I don't know if I'll be doing this for the next 50 years I'm on the planet. 10 years from now, that point of intersection might move to something different. And, one of the reasons I've always admired and respected and been inspired by you is you might not have used that language, but you certainly have been following a moving point of intersection. And it's been so much fun to watch. And I love that you follow your heart, you follow your passion, but you also stay in alignment with the things that you are really good at and where all of your natural talents and gifts lie. So for me, my evolution will always just be pursuing that point of intersection and pursuing the North Star of the man that I'm trying to become.
Dude, what an answer to start us off today. Are you kidding me? So let's break this down, okay? Because on this journey, okay, you have gone from basketball player to basketball coach. You've worked with some of the greatest names, right? Kobe, Steph, KD. You've been a coach. You've written multiple books, okay? What I'm curious about here is as you go through these different iterations, how are you able to stay so focused on doing the little things in order to have the big results?
Well, part of it is just an awareness. It's an awareness and an acceptance and appreciation of how important the little things are. I think it was John Wooden that said, there are no big things. There's just an accumulation of little things. It was either John Wooden or John Maxwell, one of the brilliant Johns. But either way, there's so much truth to that. And so I have a respect for the basics. I have an admiration for the fundamentals. So for me, that is part of my recalibration process, is making sure that whatever it is that I'm trying to excel in, that I stay focused on those basic building blocks. I also have systems in place that keep me honest into doing that. and I surround myself with an inner core of people that hold me accountable to doing that. So there are times, because I'm fallible and I'm human and I make mistakes, that I start to drift away from the basics. And whenever I feel like I'm not performing at the level that I'm capable of in any area of my life, it's usually because I've started to drift away from the basics. So I quickly recalibrate, course correct, and get back to focusing on them. And I love this because this principle has such high utility. You know, whether you want to be the best author you're capable of, the best speaker, the best basketball player, the best guitar player, if you want to be the best husband or wife, you want to be the best mother or father, you want to be the best CEO, the first thing you have to do is ask yourself, what are the handful of fundamentals that I need to work towards mastery of during the unseen hours that will allow me to perform at a world-class level in this very specific area? And then whatever that answer is, focus on doing those things. Focus on working relentlessly on those things during the unseen hours. And, you know, basketball, it's pretty easy. It's shooting and passing and rebounding and defending and handling the ball. You can do those things and combine them with some athleticism, some basketball IQ, and some mental toughness. You have the cocktail of becoming the best player that you're capable of. Well, it's the same thing. If you want to become a better spouse or a better author or a better CEO, ask yourself, you know, what is the passing, shooting, rebounding, and defending of this specific area? And how can I work on that every day of my life?
Yeah. For you as a speaker, what do you find are your fundamentals that would equate to the passing, the dribbling, and the shooting? But also, I'm going to add in, what are the extracurriculars related to the basketball IQ, the ability to learn, and the awareness that you incorporate in your daily practice?
Love it, man. You're always so fun to talk with. So for me, there's three primary fundamentals in growing a speaking business. Number one is the actual content. What is it that I'm sharing? You know, am I sharing stuff that is practical and actionable? Am I sharing stuff that is sticky and memorable? You know, am I breaking down complex ideas and making them simple so someone can just walk away with something they can use? So the content is important. And in order to feed that, I'm constantly reading, watching, and listening and observing and being a part of things that allow me to fill my bucket. So number one is content. Number two is actual delivery. You know, can I have some energy on stage? Can I be a good storyteller? Can I share things in a compelling and captivating way that makes someone actually want to listen? We can all name speakers that have brilliant content, but mediocre delivery, and it gets lost in translation. But the reverse is also true. I've seen some people that I would run through a brick wall for because they're so inspirational, but what they're actually saying is either nonsensical or it's not very helpful. And then the third pillar, which folks often forget, and I know you know this, but it's simply being easy to work with, being low maintenance, you know, being enjoyable to work with. As a speaker, if someone's going to pay me a fairly significant amount of money to be on their stage, how can I make that process as fluid and as easy and as enjoyable for them as possible? Because they have so many things to focus on when they're putting on an event. I want to be the easiest part of that entire agenda. So if I can constantly level up my actual content, the way I deliver it, and be enjoyable to work with, then I feel very confident I will continue to grow my speaking business. And then to step outside of that, what I use for inspiration kind of in all of these domains is I love to study hip hop and I love to study stand-up comedy. Those are two other art forms based on spoken word that I'm just curious by, fascinated by, and enthralled with. And I try to learn and emulate certain characteristics of my favorite hip hop artists and my favorite comedians and find ways to use that to level up my own speaking IQ, if you will, to be able to do those three things at a much higher level.
I love it. I love it. And I want to just do a quick little plug here, because for anyone that's listening to what you said around number 3, which is being easy to work with, I want you guys to go to alansteinjr.com and you can literally see how easy he makes it for people to hire him. There is a bio there. There is information. There are keynote topics. There are images. There's kits, like everything that someone would need to think about. A speaking reel, before they were to make a decision, you have placed it right in front for them to easily see it. And this is something that I want everyone to listen is like, if you want someone to work with you, then tell them how they can work with you and make it as easy as possible for them to pay you money. And simply put, like Alan's website will say, if you want to book me to speak, please contact this person or visit this email or call this phone number. If you want to learn more about me, go here. If you want to see my keynotes, go here. If you want to see my results, go here. It is very, very straightforward, but it's directly in line with what you're talking about are your fundamentals. And that's something that I think is so respectable because so many of us have the goals. So many of us talk one way. So many of us are aspiring to be one way, but our actions don't resemble those things. And so I love that you mentioned that related to part 3 of your fundamentals.
Oh, well, thanks so much. I appreciate your kind words. I appreciate you noticing that. We've put a lot of effort into making sure that the site is as efficient and as effective as possible. But this is good advice for anyone in any walk of life. The first thing you have to do to be successful is get out of your own way. Don't make things any harder than they need to be, and if someone is going to be kind enough to consider me to be on their stage, I want to do as much of the heavy lifting as I can. I don't want them to have to spend an extra 20 minutes trying to find a phone number or an email, or they can't find, I want to make it as easy as possible and as fluid as possible, so that we can get right to the heart of the conversation, which is, am I the right fit for your event? And I appreciate you noticing that very much. And I feel the same way about all of your work, the way you make things so seamless. And I know that there's a lot of work in the unseen hours that goes into doing that it doesn't magically happen. These are the fundamentals, as we've mentioned, that we have to be very strategic about in order to improve our own businesses. And there's a concept that I live by, because one of my taglines is I try to help folks kind of simplify success. And that is, complexity undermines execution. The harder we make things, the less likely we are to do them. Or if, as leaders, the harder we make things, the less likely our team is to do them. I would laugh when I was in the youth basketball space, and a youth coach coaching 10-year-olds would be proud of the fact they've got a 40-page playbook. And I'm like, you have 10-year-olds, you have kids that can barely make layups, and you're making this way harder than it needs to be. Like, why don't you just teach them a couple of sound basketball principles? Like, after you pass, don't stand still, either screen away or cut. Like, that's good enough advice right there. You could build a whole offense just based on those two principles. So as I've gotten older, I've tried to simplify every area of my life and not add things to, but actually untether and let go of things.
I find that the people, and I'll use the basketball example, but I think this is relatable to everything. I think it's relatable to book writing, becoming a speaker, building a coaching practice. The people who overcomplicate are the people that don't exactly have the clarity that they need to get the results. And so when I think back to my playing days, and my dad was my coach of my 10-year-old team, there was no playbook. There was pass and move. If the ball is on that side, go run to the other side. If the defender has the ball, go to the defender. Like, you don't have to do it. And so we would just do these fun drills. But at the end of the day, and you look at some of the best performing college teams, they're good at what they need to be good at, and then they let the magic happen as well, right? And so I think that, I want to tie this into book writing, because a lot of our people here are writing books or they've already written books, is that when you are writing this book or you're using your book to leverage your business, you need to make sure you address 3 simple things, which is share your story so people know you and trust you, share what you can help them with, so solve their freaking problem, and then tell them how they can work with you, right? And so when you have a book, this is great for your intro. This is great for phases of your book. This is great for businesses. This is great for coaching. Like, at the end of the day, people need to know who you are and why you're relevant to them. They need to know that you can solve their problem. And then they need to know how you can actually do that for them, whether that's through your book, the speaking, the coaching. And you've done that well with both your books and with your speaking. What I would love to know here is this. You started speaking, right? We met at the end of 2016. You really changed. You started speaking, but your first book didn't come out before you started speaking. And mine, on the other hand, I wrote my first book before I started speaking because I had no idea what the heck I was actually doing. So what made you decide that it was the right time to write your first book? Did you always want to do it? Did you feel it was par for the course? Did you feel it could add additional revenue? What was the reason that made you want to start writing the books?
Well, there were several reasons. And one of the things that I love about your approach is I don't think there's one way for everyone to do it. Some people may feel more comfortable writing before they speak. Other people may want to speak before they write. Other people might not want to even speak, but they know their book can help leverage their business and they want to wait. Like, there's no right answer, I think, for everyone to figure out their own path. For me, I couldn't stand reading when I was actually a student all the way up through college. And in hindsight, I realized it's because other people were telling me what I needed to read. And I didn't much care for that. Once I graduated from college and I said, I'm going to read whatever I want to read, I became a voracious reader. And I have read hundreds of books and listened to hundreds of books, in the past 25 years, most of which fall under the kind of self-help, personal development space, because that's just the space I've always been attracted to. So I've always had a very strong respect and admiration for authors and for people that have the courage to write a book. And there have been so many books that have changed my perspective on life. Like, no exaggeration, I was a different person after reading some of these books. And I thought, wow, what a cool way to leave your fingerprint on the world, but to put something out there that other people find valuable. So I've had such a respect for authors and books. I always knew I wanted to write one. And once I started in the speaking business in 2017, I realized very quickly that I needed to get more clarity on my message. My first several keynotes, I was doing the best that I could, but they were just this random collage of stories and stats. There wasn't a progression. They weren't interlinked. There wasn't a definitive start and stop. It was just kind of like me just sharing everything. And I realized that for me to get more clarity on my message, that writing a book would be a great exercise to do that. And that this would be an opportunity to kill two birds with one stone is, write a book to get organized on my message, but also be able to have something that I could leave part of my legacy whenever this whole show is over. But to some of your points, I also knew that it would add to my credibility, that folks would consider me as a better speaker because I had written a book. Now, whether or not that was true would be for someone else to decide, but the inference would still be there. And another value that I've taken with me from the coaching community, and I've said this phrase before. I didn't come up with this phrase. I don't know who did, or I'd give them proper credit. But that is, a candle loses nothing by lighting another candle. And I realized how fortunate I've been in my career to work with some amazing players, learn from some coaches, and have some experiences that a lot of people don't get to have. And I didn't want to keep that stuff to myself. I wanted to pay that forward on stage and on page so that others could reap the benefit of the lessons that I've learned. So really, writing the book was this amalgam of all of those things. It added to my credibility. It allowed me to pay things forward. It helped me get crystal clear on my messaging. And it was kind of a bucket list item of something that I wanted to do. And for all of those reasons, Raise Your Game came out in the beginning of 2019.
And this is so good. Like, we always say it's bigger than a book, because there's just so much more than the book, whether it's for the personal reasons, the external reasons, whatever it is. What I want to know, Alan, is like, when you go to your website, what are your keynotes? Are your keynotes based off of your book? I know that you have Raise Your Game, Raise My Game, Raise Our Game, Sustain Your Game. Like you've done it. And so did all of the clarity of what you title your keynotes and workshops now come from the clarity that you found once you actually finished the book?
Yes, absolutely. And I decided to make Raise Your Game kind of the epicenter of all of my philosophies and perspectives. And from Raise Your Game have come some iterations depending on what a group wants from a keynote standpoint. But really, all of the principles that I share are found somewhere in either Raise Your Game or Sustain Your Game. And, I love the symmetry of that. I love knowing, and it's so cool because some groups will say, we're going to book you for our conference 6 months from now, but we're going to order books now, and we're going to have our entire sales team read them in advance so that there's some context when you step on stage. And that's awesome. Then there's others that say, we're going to give our books to everyone that is at the event, and that'll be kind of the reinforcement tool and the take home. So after you kill it on stage, they have something to remind them of the strategies that you shared with them. So either way, it's phenomenal. And from a business standpoint, outside of word of mouth and direct referrals, My book is the #1 generator for leads and inquiries in my speaking business.
Wow.
We get inquiries all of the time where someone says, hey, a colleague of mine gave me a copy of Raise Your Game. Would love for you to share that message with our sales team at our annual sales kickoff this January. I mean, it's amazing. And now, with vulnerability, in the true spirit of vulnerability, I have no problem sharing with you that my follow-up book, Sustain Your Game, did not do as well, commercially or sales-wise. In my opinion, it's actually a better book. But for a variety of reasons, which I don't know if you want to get into, it just didn't sell as well. I mean, even to this day, Raise Your Game outsells Sustain Your Game about 4-1, and Raise Your Game is 2 years older. And I learned some tremendous lessons from that, and I'm still very proud of Sustain Your Game. But I can say with all humility, I've kind of seen the ups and the downs, and I've done some things well, and I've made some mistakes, both in the speaking and in the book writing process. But I wouldn't trade any of it for anything. I love the process of writing a book. I love the process of marketing and promoting a book. I'm not bashful about promoting something that I believe would help others and something that I'm proud of.
Yeah, we'll have to bring you back on to talk like numbers and get into the fun stuff about that. I want to keep this going in this direction, but this is a great point that you bring up, and I'm curious. Are you going to end up with like 20 books like John Gordon, having a bunch of books? Or do you find that based on your experience, you're like, you know what? I have books that are working, bringing in great leads. I don't need to add another book or another 5 books to get the results I'm looking for to live an overall fulfilled life.
I will absolutely be writing a 3rd book. There's no question. Now, speaking of John Gordon, I like to follow his principle of one word and have one word as a theme for my year. And my one word for 2023 was focus. And with that being my one word, professionally speaking, I wanted to focus solely on growing my speaking business. So I made the decision to shelve writing the next book until 2024 at the earliest. I didn't want to do anything that took my focus off of growing my speaking business. But yes, I'm slowly compiling some notes and some ideas, and I've got some files going, and I will absolutely write another book for the reasons I just mentioned, not for any type of monetary or commercial gain, but I actually like writing books, and I actually like promoting them. And I write the books that I need to read myself. I mean, as we said, the reason I wrote Raise Your Game was so I could get crystal clear on my messaging. The reason I wrote Sustain Your Game was because I was struggling with stress and stagnation and burnout, which is the theme of that book. And you better believe that whatever I choose to write in 2024 will be a topic that I need to level up and improve. I find it equal parts liberating and therapeutic to research and write about the very things that I find challenging and difficult, so that by the time that book is printed and is for sale, I'm actually a better version of myself than when the book started. And then I hope that that's extended to whoever is kind enough to invest in reading it. I hope they are better off having read the book than not. And that's kind of my philosophy. And while I couldn't put a number on it, I kind of believe that if I am constantly reading, watching, and listening and growing and having lots of inputs into my life, then I should be prepared to write a new book at least every 2 to 3 years. I mean, I'll never write a book unless I believe I have something worthy to say of somebody else's attention. Like, I won't just put something out because I'm trying to keep up with the schedule. But in my mind, if every 2 to 3 years I don't have new stuff to share, then I'm probably not growing at the rate that I should be. And that's a little red flag for me. So yeah, I would imagine every 2 to 3 years, for as long as I'm in this profession, I will put out a new book.
So what you're saying here is that you expect to have more books than Kobe has rings.
Yes, assuming I can, stay on this path. That would certainly be a goal, which I tell you what makes not only a John Gordon, but a John Maxwell, who's got 70 or 80 books. I mean, it's mind-boggling. I mean, I'm 47 years old. I've got 2 books under my belt. So even if we say every 5 years, if I do 2 books a decade, if I live another 50 years, that's still only another 10 books. That still doesn't even put me on pace with a John Gordon or a John Maxwell. And that would be a pretty aggressive writing schedule. So, I don't play the comparison game. I love both of those Johns, and I love their works, and I've devoured their books. But for me, it's all about am I constantly learning and growing? And if I don't have enough to say to put in a book every 2 to 3 years, then I'm probably not growing at the rate that I should be. And I use that as kind of my metric.
Wow. So much bigger than a book. So much bigger. Also, we've talked about a lot of Johns today. I don't know why, but that's a theme today. But Alan, let's talk about this, okay? Because obviously, I have to bring this up. I'm the basketball guy. I know you talk about basketball in every podcast, but like if I don't bring up basketball, I'd feel like we're leaving the readers without an opportunity to combine the greatest sport in the world with the opportunity to grow their business. And so we're going to keep this segment incredibly short, but I do want to talk about sports because you've seen the work ethic of Kobe. You've seen the blow up of Steph. You've seen KD go from a 15-year-old skinny dude to a unbelievable once in a generational scoring talent in the world. What I want to know here, and I've asked you many questions about this, and those interviews are probably on the interwebs, and you've talked about it a lot. What for you has been the single most impactful memory that you have working with some of the top performers? And this does not have to be a lesson that it's taught you, but just what is like one of the memories that sticks with you and why?
Love this question. Well, as you know, because you've seen, I have a signature story about meeting Kobe for the first time. I have a signature story about meeting Steph for the first time. And I even have a story about working KD out for the first time. Those are all easily found on my YouTube channel, and they'll be a lot more theatrical because they'll be on stage with some bright lights. So I'm not going to retell those, but I'll
we'll link those. We'll link those in the show notes so that people can see that. Like, and I'll tell you just real quick, go listen to those. Like those will be 3 of the best videos that can inspire you, like without a doubt. And you'll see Alan Style. So like, just listen to those there. But we'll leave this episode for some of the unseen content.
Yeah, well, I'm going to share a story that I haven't told publicly very often, only a few different times, but it was a really memorable one. So I live in a suburb of Washington, D.C., which is also where Kevin Durant's from, but we kind of lived on opposite sides of the Beltway. And, it would take me about 45 minutes to pick Kevin up every morning before school. And because of what time school starts and how long we were going to work out and making time for breakfast, if you start counting backwards, I was getting up at 4 or 4:30 in the morning to drive around the Beltway to take him to the local YMCA to work him out, to then get him breakfast to make sure he could get to school on time. And so there were some early mornings, which understandably as a teenager, he probably did not feel like doing at the time, but was willing to make that commitment. And there was one morning, it was really cold, and I was taking him to the YMCA, and he had his hood up, and he was really quiet and kind of slouched over, and it was dark, and I think it was rainy. And there was a new person working the front desk at the YMCA, and it was an older woman. I didn't ask to see her driver's license, but I'm guessing she was mid-70s. And as we were walking by the front desk, she said, "Good morning." And Kevin didn't say anything. He had his head down and he just kept walking. And she said it slightly louder and almost with a tad of disappointment or irritation in her voice. She said, "I said, good morning." And this moment came to a pause for me because I'm thinking, we've got a somewhat probably cranky, irritable teenager in the throes of winter when it's dark and cold out, somewhere he doesn't want to be, and he now has an elder kind of giving him a hard time. How is this going to unfold? And Kevin took his hood off and he turned around and he smiled and he said, "I'm sorry, good morning." And I remember taking this sigh of relief and just thinking to myself, this is a high character young man. He could have ignored her. He could have turned around and flicked her off. He could have, there's a lot of things he could have done, which I wouldn't have condoned, but at least would have been understandable for a kid of his age. And instead, he had the emotional integrity and agility to realize he was a little disrespectful and to course correct and recalibrate and make amends. And that just, in that moment, I was like, this kid is high character. He's high integrity. Obviously, he's a talented basketball player, but however good he's going to get in the game, he's going to have the character to support that level talent. And I just knew in that moment, because we hadn't been working together very long at that time, but I knew in that moment, this is a pretty unique and special young man. This kid was raised right. He has good values, and they, they're congruent with his talent on the court. And I remember feeling this sense of relief that he chose to take the high road. And that is a memory that will stay with me forever.
Dude, what a story. What a story. I love it. Is there I told you before that I was going to ask some random questions, just whatever came to the
Sure.
mind, because I think this is all relevant. Is there a quality? I think there's the it factor. We can all agree that there are people that have the it factor and those that don't have the it factor. But is there a quality that you can pinpoint that if you said to a CEO, to an organization of salespeople, to a group of entrepreneurs, or even to the best athletes in the world, is there a singular quality that you have found that when people possess it, their ability to achieve high performance and sustain high performance is at an all-time high versus those that can't?
Self-awareness, without hesitation. Those that see themselves and evaluate themselves in a way that's congruent with the way the rest of the world sees them, absolutely is a prerequisite, is a necessity. I wouldn't even say it's a nice to have. It's a necessity to maximizing high performance. Now, there are some people that have achieved great things in spite of not having self-awareness. So I'm not saying it's a requirement to achieve, but it's a requirement for you to achieve what you're capable of. And the best of the best, they know what they do well. They know where their talents lie. They know their core genius. They know their gifts, but they also have the humility to acknowledge and the awareness to acknowledge their opportunities for growth. The areas where they can improve, their weaknesses. They're crystal clear on their dreams and their goals, their ambitions and what drives them, but they also have the courage to acknowledge their fears, their insecurities, and the baggage that they've been dragging through life. They're able to see all of that, and they accept themselves for having all of that. They don't pile on shame and guilt, and they're not self-critical and judgmental. They acknowledge that they've got some great things about themselves and some things they'd like to improve, but they acknowledge that as part of who they are, and they blend confidence and humility in a very masterful way. But self-awareness absolutely is a trait that can help any of us unlock what we're capable of.
Wow. I love how just quickly you knew the answer to that question. Like you didn't have to think about it. But this actually brings up a really interesting point, because when you talk about self-awareness, you're talking about people who know what they're really, really good at, and also people who are aware of what can be improved for them to ultimately get to the level that they're capable of, like you said. There's two different frames of thoughts when you become self-aware. There's the frame of thought that I'm very self-aware and I do know my weaknesses, and therefore I'm going to work on them to try to bring them up. And then there's the other mentality that's I'm really good at this, I'm not that good at this. I'm going to double down only on my strengths and then either outsource or figure out what else to do for my weaknesses. Do you subscribe to one or the other, or do you find there to be a combination of both based on your work as a speaker, author, and coach?
It's a combination of both, because there's a little bit of nuance. I don't believe that all weaknesses are created equal.
Mm.
Let's just use you for an example. And this is clearly not the case, because you're one of the best listeners that I've ever been around. But let's just say that actively listening is one of your weaknesses, that you're kind of hard-headed. You're not very in the present moment. You're always formulating what you want to say. You're not really paying attention to the other person, which of course is the opposite of what you really do. But for this example,
Yeah.
if listening is a weakness, that's something that can erode every single relationship in your life. It can be a thorn in your paw that will prevent you from being the best that you're capable of. That is a weakness that you absolutely need to address. On the other hand, if you have a weakness where you don't like math, you don't like spreadsheets, you don't like numbers, I wouldn't worry about that, because you can hire someone else to do those things. You can't hire someone else to listen during your most important relationships. So those aren't created equal. But generally speaking, I do prescribe more to the school of thought that we should spend more time doubling down on the things we're really good at to make those world class, and don't worry so much about the things that we're not as good at, unless, and that's where the asterisk comes in, it's something that can prevent you from being your best self, like listening. And I use that as an example because listening was kind of a thorn in my paw for many years. And it was something I've had to actively try to improve. And I have a long list of things that I'm not very good at, and I am totally fine with those. I have other people do those, or I delegate them, or I pay people to do them. I don't worry about them. I try to stay in my lane, do the things that I'm fairly decent at naturally, and then try to improve the applicable weaknesses. So it is kind of a combination of both, but I do skew a little bit more towards the double down on your strengths, and don't worry about taking something you really suck at and trying to be mediocre at it. That's not going to be a very good return on your investment. But taking something you're naturally pretty good at and becoming world class at it, that is an unbelievably wise investment.
Mm. And it sounds like, as I tune into my active listening skills here, it sounds like the with the nuance. I love how you articulated this. To me, I'm getting this feeling of like the weaknesses that we have to pay attention to are more of the soft skills, are more of those things that are like really about us and our interpersonal relationships. And the other things are things that are not necessary for us to be better as a person, be better as a friend, be better as a partner. And would you, I know we just gave one example, but do you feel that that's kind of like, if we were to dive deeper into this, it would lend itself to kind of that frame of thought on the weaknesses that you should focus on versus the ones maybe you can avoid?
100%. Well, here,
Okay.
since we're basketball buddies, let's just use a basketball example. Shaquille O'Neal, one of the most dominant big men in the history of the game. If Shaquille O'Neal would have decided to spend 3 hours a day to improve his ball handling, that really wouldn't have done much to level up his contribution to the Lakers in this example. So that's a weakness that is not really part of his role and is one that he doesn't have to focus on. Now, if his leadership was really suffering and he chose not to focus on that weakness, that could actually put a ceiling on how good the Lakers could be. So that's another example of figure out which ones are preventing you from becoming the person that you strive to become. And if you're a part of a team, what's preventing the team from becoming as good as it's capable of versus something that's more kind of a one-off, if you will. So yeah, with that basketball example, because every player, outside of maybe the top 5 or 6 guys in the NBA. I mean, LeBron James can do just about everything. KD can do just about everything. Russell Westbrook can do just about everything. But outside of a dozen guys, everybody else is somewhat of a specialist. And they have 1 or 2 basketball skills in particular that they do at a very, very high level. And they spend most of their time making those skills even better. They don't spend a ton of time trying to make the other things mediocre at best.
Yeah. And that's why I tell people, if you're not an author, okay, or you struggle with writing or you don't feel you have the time, that's why you work with us, is because of that weakness, right? And I know we don't have time to go into it, but I know that's why you brought in a co-author, right? And that's why you brought in, let's talk about another John, right? To help you with your books and stuff, to get that additional thing, to raise your game, literally using your words. And I think that that's such an important part of self-awareness to tie it all together. So I want to know here as we start to wrap up, who do you love speaking to? Who do you love working with? Because I want to make sure that everybody here knows what you're available for and what you're focused on for this year, knowing that focus is your big word.
Oh, you're so kind, man. Well, there's 3 groups in particular that I love speaking with. And the cool part is I'm very industry agnostic. Like, it's not like I just do stuff in the financial services space. I mean, if you saw it, you actually can, because there's a link on my site of previous clients. If you saw the variety of different industries that I've been able to speak, it's so much fun for me. And the reason I'm able to do that is because leadership is leadership. Culture is culture. It doesn't matter if you have a small startup in the IT space or you run a Fortune, 100 financial firm. Leadership is leadership. Those principles have high utility. But the 3 groups I speak the most to, one are leadership groups, whether it's C-suite executives, managers, directors, supervisors, anyone that has been given a power of authority but needs to improve their ability to impact and influence is absolutely number 1. Number 2 are sales professionals in any form, whether you're a realtor or you sell, widgets, anyone that is selling a product or a service, I love speaking with. And the third, surprisingly, are folks kind of in the HR space, the glue that holds organizations together, if you will. And folks bring me in to work with those portions of their team. So yeah, industry agnostic, size of company agnostic, but those are the 3 groups that I absolutely love working with. And they also tend to be the ones that resonate most with my message.
Yeah, I love it. And so how do we learn more about you, follow you, hire you? Where do we go to continue to learn about the legend?
Well, AlanSteinJr.com is the hub for everything. If you're interested in either book, raise your game or sustain your game, just go to Amazon or Audible or anywhere that you like to buy books and audiobooks. And then I take a lot of pride in being not only very easy to find and accessible, but very responsive on social media. And I'm just at Alan Stein Jr. On Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn. If any part of our conversation struck a chord or resonated, or someone has a question or wants to share a story about writing a book or anything, just shoot me a DM on Instagram or LinkedIn. I'm very good about getting back to people.
I love it, dude. Alan, thanks so much for coming on the show. I mean, I always have a great time talking with you. I feel like the conversations can go way longer, but we keep it good. And so thank you for coming on the show.
Likewise, brother. It's good to see you.
Awesome. All right, you guys, you heard him. You heard him. You heard the stories. You heard what he's done. Make sure to go follow him. Make sure to go buy his book. And if you enjoyed this episode, reach out to him. He's got so much knowledge. He shares so much. And he is somebody who has gone through career changes, evolutions, iterations. He's written multiple books. He's used it to speak. He's used it to make an impact. And so if this episode just resonated with you, let us know. Let Alan know. And I hope that you all have an absolutely fantastic day.